January, apologies. The August 22nd, 2023 Winchester Planning Board meeting. We are being recorded both on Zoom and by WinCam. Thank you very much, WinCam. If you do not wish to appear on the recording, please turn your video off and please mute your microphone. But we have set it up this evening so that you will need to raise your hand in order to get your microphone unmuted so that we can avoid Zoom bombing. So, Carrie seems to be having some issues.
She told us this. She's traveling on a plane right now, so she
Oh,
needs
that's
to
right.
be on takeoff.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'd forgotten about that. In any case, please, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand and we will get you in order. This evening, Taylor, if you could pop up. Please, everyone, welcome our new town planner, Taylor Herman. Great news. Taylor started last Monday, so he's only been on the job for a week and he is definitely in the midst of things. I also like to note that we have our recording secretary, Nancy Polcari, with us this evening, as well as town engineer, Matt Schumann. We have to do a roll call, don't we? So let's make this official. I Ching Scott.
Present.
Sally Dale.
Present.
Nick Rosettos.
Present.
And I am present as well. And we've just been reminded our other member, Carrie Layton, is on a plane. Okay, so please, Taylor, if you would pop up our agenda. So the first thing we want to do is talk about updates. Obviously, the big update is Taylor has joined us. I think other updates can be saved. So there's an update in MBTA 3A. We'll talk about that later this evening. I don't think there's anything.
We have an update about the banner and the graphics.
Sure. So the logo was we approved at our last meeting, we approved the slightly revised version of the logo. Our graphic artist has sent that out. Unfortunately, it is in quarantine in the town's email system because it came in a zip file and I don't know what happened. Our consultant is currently on vacation. So once she was sending us, I believe, the logo with all of the associated fonts and such, and then our next step is the banner. So I think that's it.
That's good to know.
I have a Cross Street update. The project on Cross Street, I forget the number now.
8789.
Yep.
The LIP 8789.
Yeah.
And somebody can correct me if I'm not the most clear on it, but I believe that the ZBA approved the original proposal, which was the rental of 9 units.
Great.
Didn't they actually withdraw that proposal?
No, the proposal was reintroduced last Friday.
Wait, which one? The one with the
original.
The original proposal was reintroduced.
I don't know the full details. I'm sorry, but
I think that there was earnest conversations and it was determined that it was very much in the best interest of the town and the applicant was willing to make the financial stretch.
Well, that's amazing. Excellent news.
What did the original proposal have in it, the subsequent one?
So it was 9 units of rental with I think 2 or 3 units that are at an AMI of, one was at 40% maybe, or but then the subsequent one became 8 units of condos with.
Okay. Did we
So
still
for
get
for the town, it means it would be a 9 unit on the SHI index.
Excellent.
Whereas the latter one was 2.
Do you know if we got the design review in this proposal that making it square to the street and all the comments that everyone had?
It was the one that we made favorable recommendations.
Okay. Great, I guess.
Yeah, no, that is great. I think. I mean, it's if it had gone full condo, I'm not sure that the town's resources would have been best spent there because we just didn't get much. Anyway, any other updates? Okay, so why don't we move on to meeting minutes? We have 3 meeting minutes to review. So Taylor, if you could flip to those somewhere. I don't think they're in order in the packet, but we can get to them. There, the one that says draft.
Are you letting people in at the same time?
Yeah, I can let the people in. Oh, no, that's not the right
you,
one.
you can?
Yeah, because I'm co-host, I can let them in. So I'll take care of that. If you can find the,
It's the third.
It's the first
second,
page
third,
or
and-
second page. Yeah.
It's the second, third, and fourth pages of the packet, or third, fourth, and fifth pages of the packet. That's what. Oh, after two. Oh, I thought
Yeah.
it was before tool.
no, let's just go page by page till we hit it.
It looks like it's missing.
No, it's in there.
Okay, there,
I know that Suzanne
it's right there.
Yep.
added another or sent
Yep.
out a new packet.
Is this the new packet?
Yeah, I saw it go by. You see, page 7 has the word draft sticking out of the top of your screen. If you go up above that, there's 2 more of those, or
Well,
6
that's
more.
the Weston and Simpson.
No, that draft. That's. Oh,
That's-
that you're right. You
No,
changed.
this
let's
is all
just-
tool stuff.
Yeah, it's all tool stuff, but I think, let's keep going. It's got to be in there somewhere. I know I saw them because I had a comment that Taylor was interviewed twice.
Yeah, I saw that.
I think you must have,
No, I don't see them here.
yeah, I think you might have an earlier packet.
The
I
one
think
from
you got things
yesterday
here.
has it. Monday's
Yeah.
packet.
Can you share, Deb?
Yeah, I can share. Taylor, I think you, I'll take over just very quickly while you go grab the
Yep.
other packet. And then, okay, and then pardon me while I have to do something to my screen so that you can see my entire screen. Okay. Sorry about all this. And then let us go to. Okay, here we go. Let me, can everyone read that? So we're looking at the meeting
No,
minutes. Too small, too big?
you're not sharing.
We see your gallery.
Oh, something has changed. Okay, that's odd. Let me try again. Share screen. Yes. Okay, how about now?
Yes.
And okay, can you see the minutes now?
Yep. Can you maximize?
I sure can.
Well,
Okay, so
yeah.
meeting minutes for July 17th, 2023.
I did
thi-
have one. What was it? Oh, what you said.
Well,
Name.
yeah, so Jenny Draganda was on this was actually, Jenny DeGranda was the candidate who was being interviewed. And I'm sure I messed this up, Nancy, when I sent you
Hmm.
the notes, but this should be Jenny DeGranda here. Any other comments?
No.
Okay, so can I get an approval to amend to approval of the minutes of July 17, 2023 as amended?
So
So
moved.
moved. Second.
As-
Thank you.
Okay, all in favor, Nick,
Aye.
thank you. Sally,
I
I Ching,
Aye.
And I say aye as well. Thank you. Let's move on very quickly to the next. On this one, this, I believe, is, I didn't have a problem with this one. Any comments or corrections on this one?
I have none.
Nope.
So can I get a motion to approve minutes of Tuesday, July 18th, 2023?
I'll move that.
I second.
Thank you. All in favor, Nick,
Aye.
Sally,
Aye.
I Ching?
Aye.
I say aye as well. And then I believe we have a third one, which is Tuesday, August 8th, 2023. Wow, we're getting caught up here. With a whole bunch of people, with some of them who don't have their last names. Any comments or corrections?
I have only one on the
Okay.
bottom of page 1, where it says Taylor Bearden.
Yep.
He's a partner at Civico, capital P partner at Civico.
Okay.
That's the only edit I have in the whole thing.
Any other corrections?
I have none.
Okay. Sally, if you would be so kind as to send those to Nancy.
I shall.
Thank you. Let's do a roll call. Can I get a motion to approve minutes of August 8th, 2023 as amended?
I'll move it.
I
Second,
Second.
thank you. Roll call vote. Nick,
Aye.
I Ching,
Aye.
Sally,
Aye.
and I say aye as well. Excellent. Where the heck are we? Taylor, shall I turn it back over to you?
With luck, yes.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. I tried to stop sharing.
Okay, let's see if I can.
Yeah, please just steal it from me because my screen has
Okay.
locked up.
You see mine?
Ask everyone else. 'Cause
No.
Well, Taylor, do you have your have the agenda up?
No,
I
that
have
we're
the tool
viewing-
design scope and fee up.
No, we're viewing DFs
Oh
right
yeah,
now.
we're seeing Diab's screen. I see that.
So I'm going to kill my Zoom and then we'll see what happens.
You froze, DM.
Yeah, and it says it's still on it. And on my screen, it says I'm sharing mine.
You just redialed in.
Maybe Taylor, you retry to share.
Yeah, it says I'm sharing. And but on Zoom it says viewing DF's screen. Oh, I think. How about now?
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ta-da!
DM, you're on mute. Can't hear you. Nope. Oh, Taylor has to unmute. Okay.
There we go. Thank you. Please make me a co-host.
You
So-
are.
Welcome, everyone. We're going to reopen, or I should say, continue the hearing on the CBD petition for the Waterfield lot in Town Center. Do we have Town Council with us yet?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So what we are doing this evening, so we're going to go through a couple of administrative things, which is to take a look at the scope for the I think we have to vote to reopen the hearing. Let me just make sure that, so can I get a motion to reopen the hearing for the Waterfield lot?
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second,
Okay, let's do a roll call. Nick,
Aye.
Sally,
Aye.
Yi Ching?
aye.
I say aye as well. Thank you. So we have before us, we're going to be looking at the scope and the fee for the traffic consultants, for the 53G review consultants for traffic and stormwater. And I think we've had one of these earlier, but they're both up in front of us. So Matt Schuman, town engineer, if you just want to say something as to your appreciation of the completeness of the scope.
Yeah, so the engineering department provided the plans and the traffic study to Tool Design Group to come up with the scope, and we're comfortable with the scope that they came up with. It's a pretty standard scope for peer reviews of traffic studies. I can answer any questions. As any.
Okay, is there any questions from the board?
Yeah. I have several, and they might be fairly short answers, but did Tool review the RFP? Were they part of the writing the RFP at all? Does anybody know?
When you say RFP, which RFP?
I know that they're familiar with the project from previous conversations, but yeah, having only been here 2 months, I don't know the completeness of, to what extent that they were involved in the previous discussions.
Can someone from the project who's with us provide that information? Let's see.
Hi, this is Andrew Consigli
Yeah.
from Civico.
Mhm.
Yeah, and what was the question regarding
and then when
O'Toole?
the-
Were they on the team previously? Is that or part of the RFP?
Were they involved
What
with
was
the
question?
RFP? No, were they?
No, they weren't. Yeah, they weren't involved in the RFP.
Okay, and then I have maybe 3 or 4 questions like it, but did Tool review the select board approved renegotiation? Did they look at that?
I don't believe I gave them the agreement to review. I only gave them the site plan and the circulation, the traffic study, because that would be the extent of the peer review. So they wouldn't be reviewing any previous agreements that the town had made.
And then I know that Tool was part of the team, or maybe the team that designed the Church and Waterfield intersection. Is that correct?
Yes.
And when that was done, when that was designed, did that study or did that execution have in mind this particular project?
Unfortunately, I can't answer that since that all happened before I was here. I know, they're certainly familiar with the projects that are going on, but I'm not sure if they envisioned this project when they designed that one.
Would Tool be able to answer that at all?
I can certainly ask
isn't it-
and get back to you.
Okay, isn't Andrew a part of that? Or
So Tool is would be providing the peer review, the actual
I see.
consultant so
I
the
see.
VHB, I believe, did the traffic study for the
I see. And
developer.
VHB is now present, but Tool is not present right now.
Tool is not present
I
right
see.
now.
Okay, and then similarly at at the McCall intersection, so at Waterfield and Mystic Valley Parkway, I believe Tool designed or either peer reviewed that particular intersection. And I'm just curious if that took into account this particular project as well in kind of a future capacity.
So again, I can't really answer that. However, typically VHB, as part of their traffic study, would be looking at what's in place now. And I believe those intersections were included in their study. So then Tool would be doing a peer review of what VHB is saying. So VHB would be kind of looking and, with the additional traffic from this project, would those intersections still function as designed, or would anything need to change? And then, so VHB, I haven't, read every page of the transportation study, but typically they would give an opinion on that if there were any impacts to those adjacent intersections. And then Tool would peer review what VHB finds. And certainly, I know.
Is there a
that-
concern about the functioning of the two intersections once this project is up? Just for the edification
No,
of the
I'm just
board.
curious. So are you adding on to my question? I am curious about whether or not the previous studies had considered, a 60-unit possibility happening on Waterfield,
Oh, I
because
see.
those are key nodes. Yeah, that's all I'm asking. And furthermore, is Tool part of sort of the fire safety portion, or is that a separate issue?
So developers been in contact with the fire department and providing circulation plans. And as part of the peer review would also look at those circulation plans. And typically what someone will do is they'll run what are called turning templates for the trucks, which basically they kind of it's basically a template that they put on the plans that show where the trucks, would be turning and can they make the movements or not. So that's something that both the fire department and the peer reviewer would be looking at. And that would go not just for the fire trucks, but also for the design trucks for the site, which I believe was a box truck, a small delivery truck. So they would be looking at the circulation plans they brought in, making sure that they can get to the rear of that adjacent commercial property.
And maybe one last one, perhaps just curious about the scope covering possibly snow removal and that kind of coordination.
Yeah, so I think that is something that needs to be reviewed, not just by Tool, but by the town as part of site plan review. So certainly, I think there will be a number of sets of eyes on that. I assume you're talking about snow removal to make sure that the trucks can get in versus,
That
snow.
plus like moving around, I guess all of the residential parking spots would be covered, right? So it's more
Right.
removal of the public parking.
Yeah. So as part of a stormwater management plan, they typically will provide a snow storage plan that shows exactly where the designated snow storage areas are. And again, I'm sure that their team can speak a little bit more detail than I can, but typically they either designate a spot on site or sometimes very dense developments haul it out. So I would be looking to what they are proposing, and then we would be kind of doing a reality check on it.
So I'm sorry, one more, sorry. I'm just thinking with the public parking spots, is that the responsibility of the developer or of the town?
I believe the developer is responsible for snow removal for the entire site. But I would defer to them or want to double check because I haven't read all of the agreements.
Thank you. That's all.
So I think what we're going to do, I Ching, is all of your questions, we will take all of them with the answers and we'll put them up on an FAQ portion of the Waterfield Lot Planning Board website. So that
Great.
those that Matt has to go back to look at, we'll put them up there. Are there any other questions on the traffic circulation one?
I read through it once, but I did see that they limit their assessment of increases in volume to the immediately adjacent intersections, the ones that I Ching mentioned. They don't try to assess after that because it's random chance which way the cars will go from there. And what I saw, and okay, this isn't about Tool, this is about the original VHB, was that it was a low impact in peak hours. And so that's a little bit surprising to me, but then I don't know what I don't know about the parameters and assumptions underlying traffic studies. But it would be interesting to hear a third party or a second party, a peer perspective on that. And then just quickly to follow up on what I Ching was asking about, I don't have very many issues with the Waterfield to Mount Vernon Street intersection, but I've had a number of people say to me that they think that the Waterfield to Church should be a three-way stop. And so that's the only thing that I wonder whether that can be explored as part of the peer review or whether that's outside the scope and it's a subject for another day.
So the peer review doesn't, so there's a question of whether there are additional things that the developer could do to mediate any impacts they would have on the traffic in the area within a reasonable area. And so we would have to look at the traffic studies and to look at what the traffic review consultant says about the validity of those studies to get an idea of what the impacts are. But I don't know, and Matt, maybe you can fill me in on this. Does the peer reviewer make recommendations for how to mitigate any impacts, or do they just review the documents as presented to make sure that they are correct as to facts and methods and outcomes?
So typically, in my experience, which is, has been in other communities, they're primarily looking at the information that's provided and the mitigation that's proposed, depending upon the impacts. If there's a belief that additional mitigation is necessary, they probably would come back and say, as a recommendation to consider looking at something, or, that information may appear incomplete. I think again, I don't have the documents in front of me. I think when they designed Waterfield and Church, they looked at a three-way stop, but it's certainly, within the board's, I would imagine, ability to ask that the developer to look at that, since they have the data. I'm not sure if it meets the requirements or not, but, I think something like that sounds reasonable.
So, I'm sorry, would someone else want to speak? I apologize if I cut you off. No? So I think that perhaps we should wait until the traffic consultant comes back with a review of VHB's report, and with their analysis, we make a determination if we feel that more mitigation is required for the intersections that would be made mostly effective. I think that's a reasonable way forward.
That seems reasonable to me.
And a peer reviewer would look at the intersections that they're looking at and would provide an opinion. You didn't go far out enough. You should look at this intersection or that intersection. So that is something they'll consider in looking at the information that they've provided.
Okay. Any further questions on this scope and fee from the board?
Can you scroll? Thank you.
So could we hear from the development team as to their assessment of the scope and fee? Because I don't believe we've heard back from you.
Yes, hi, this is Andrew Consigli. Yeah, we felt the scope was appropriate and really no comment. So.
Okay. So
pretty straightforward.
So to move forward on this, if there are no further questions, then I'd like to, is there a motion to approve the scope and fee for the 53G traffic review consultant tool, where the fee is $11,900?
I'll move that.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, roll call vote, please. Nick?
Aye.
Sally?
Aye.
Yi Ching?
Aye.
And I say aye as well. Thank you very much. We will get that vote. We do have the rules are that we need to have minutes to send to the comptroller, so at least that's what she said last time, so.
Minutes of what?
Minutes of our vote, so.
Oh,
So let us move on to the Weston and Sampson scope. Matt, do you want to talk a little about this? I know you talked about this last time, but maybe a little about this.
Yeah, so Weston Sampson provided a scope to look at, a lot of times they're looking at just the stormwater, but this is really a review of all the utilities, including the stormwater management system, the sewer system, and the drainage, the water system. I believe on the plans, they're proposing to extend the water main from Waterfield Road from Laraway up to Church Street. There's actually no water main there right now. So that's one of the things that we would be interested in having Weston and Sampson look at. They'll perform a review of the stormwater management standards to make stormwater management report to make sure they meet the town standards. And they will also review the sewer connections to make sure the sewer connections meet our standards.
Okay, any questions, concerns from the board?
I do, but I went first last time, so I'll let others speak.
I have no questions.
Nick?
No questions here.
Okay, Cheng, floor is yours.
Okay, so I'm curious about how this Weston and Sampson scope intersects with the separate but parallel process that Conservation Commission is looking at. Is Concom looking also at the sewer and the stormwater and the water system? I suppose not the water system, but perhaps the stormwater and sewer system.
I'm not sure to what extent they've had conversations with the Conservation Commission on this project. There's a small section of the site that is in the 200-foot riverfront area. So there's nothing in any of the buffer zones or, it's a very small corner. The section that is subject to Concom review is, I believe, currently paved and is going to be porous pavers. I would say if this were a review for the Concom, it would be very similar. So we could certainly share the results with the Concom. And I can certainly follow up with Elaine Vreeland and the developer to see what they're thinking. But, I think the intent would be that if the Concom were reviewing the stormwater management, this would perform the same function. This review would perform the same function. But they're certainly not looking at Concom specific issues, such as, whether they're meeting the riverfront regulations and whatnot. They'd strictly be looking at stormwater.
And I see that Jay.
I have more questions, but I'll let Mr. Tellerman speak.
Yeah, I think Matt's last point is pretty apt. The Concom is going to be looking at, there might be some overlap, but they are looking at it from wetland interests and how the stormwater could impact the resource area. Some of that information will dovetail with some of the information you were doing, but largely you're going to be looking at those issues from basic compliance with the Mass DEP stormwater guidelines, and not all of those will be applicable to the limited scope of the Concom review, which isn't to say that it's not helpful to coordinate review, and where it can be, it might also result in a cost savings for the applicant, but that could perhaps be done, and I don't know where the Concom is in the process, just by communication between the two boards, or the applicant could reach out to the Conservation Commission and make that suggestion, of course, when it comes time for them to do peer review.
Yeah. Okay. I know there's been concerns also, or just historical, flooding and even for the Aberjona, a sort of cleanliness issue, as well as a flooding into Ginn Field historically. I don't know how long ago that was, but have heard from neighbors that has happened. So I know there have been a lot of remediation of the riverway and in the flooding And I'm curious from Matt's perspective, Matt Schuman's perspective, how robust is this, and will this with this scope, Weston and Sampson scope? I know we don't ask developers to look beyond, very far beyond their projects, but from your perspective, Matt, if you could tell us how robust sort of that area has been in terms of flooding and water issues.
So I can say from the information that they've provided that their site is not in the floodplain, so it's not, in regulatory, subject to regulatory review for floodplain issues. Certainly, as you pointed out, the average owner is not that far away and does flood. In terms of what the requirements are for the site, they would be required to meet or exceed meet or reduce the peak runoff rate and volume from the site. So they can't increase the flows to the river. So they can't make the flows worse. Also, because this site is over an acre, it's also subject to additional nutrient removal requirements from a water quality standpoint. The average owner, one of the particular pollutants of concern is phosphorus. So they will be required to remove a certain amount of phosphorus from the site through stormwater management techniques prior to discharging their stormwater into the river. So certainly at the size of the average owner river watershed, it's probably a small impact, but they will be making the river better from a water quality standpoint. So those are all information that's been provided by VHB that Weston and Sampson will review.
Great. And then maybe one last question. Last week we had last meeting we had extended conversation about landscaping on the site, and maybe perhaps maximizing trees and plantings even on some of the roof decks that they have in their project. And so would Weston and Sampson be able to look at that portion, and is it covered in this scope, the landscaping portion, and how that affects water flow?
So that's not currently in their scope, but they do have landscape architects on staff that could review that if it was desired. And I'm sure, again, we discussed, like, it's not a lot of landscaping since it's pretty heavily developed. I'm sure there wouldn't be a large cost to that. And I can certainly see if they feel that they could include that in this scope, or if it would be an extra or an additional cost.
Yeah. I think the roof surfaces were talked about as a potential addition to the meager landscaping that was happening. So yeah, that would be helpful.
Sure.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the board? So one of the things that, so first off, in terms of the existing scope and fee, if we could get someone from the development team to address whether this is an acceptable scope and fee. Oh yes, please scroll to somewhere there's a fee. How much is the fee on this?
27.8.
27.8. So someone from
second to last page.
Yeah, someone from Civico and Causeway.
Is Mr. Hubbard?
This is Andrew. I was muted. Just got unmuted. Yeah, this in terms of this proposal, it's appropriate and works for us. We're just hoping the landscape scope can be included in the current proposal price.
Okay, so I'm trying to understand how we move forward on this without having the landscape component cause another 2-week delay in getting this forward. So I suppose we could approve this and then go back to Weston and Sampson and ask them if they would be willing to put that in their scope. I don't know how that goes. Jay, do you have any suggestions on how we would handle that negotiation?
Well, I mean, I think you could approve it subject to their agreement to include the landscaping item, which seems to be somewhat minor in significance to the volume of work that they're going to do there. Obviously, if they're not going to, then that's going to be an add-on that is going to have to adjust the price. But I still think you can get them going by approving the base amount here and making that inquiry. And then if at a subsequent meeting we'll have to tuck landscaping in on that, then I think that that's fine. I would hope that they would be willing to work with us.
Okay, so thank you. So why don't we move to approve this with the additional consideration of going to Weston and Sampson and including a review of the landscape design within this fee. And if that doesn't work, we'll come to another agreement, but hopefully they will be able to do so. So I think that was a motion. Is someone willing to move
I
that?
would still move on that.
And is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, so the motion is to approve this scope and fee, and the fee is $27,800. With the proviso that we're going to go back to Weston and Sampson and see if they can include landscaping. Let's do a roll call vote. Nick?
Aye.
Sally?
Aye.
Yi Ching?
Aye.
And I say aye as well. Thank you very much. The third set of consultants would be for design review. And we have reached out to a number of firms to see if that is something that they have. We reached out to three firms last week. We've heard back from one, which actually doesn't do that, but they referred us to a couple other firms. So we are still trying to come up with three candidates for the design review.
They had a recommendation on one. The people
Yes, they
find and-
recommended form in place, which I think we're already using for another purpose. And then they recommended someone that we actually looked at for a previous design review, whose name I've forgotten.
I have forgotten it too, but is it necessary that we authorize Brian Zakeli, who's doing this for us, as a additional person on the team, to go and talk to that person?
I think that's part of what we've asked him to do.
Okay, good.
Is to
Excellent.
coordinate
Excellent.
this. So
Great.
just that we're still trying to get our three candidates for that. So then I think that at this point, we're going to move to public comments. We want to open this up for public comments if there are no other comments from the board. I should note that we have had, I believe, only 2 emails to the planning board. Remember, you can always email us at planningboard@winchester.us, and please put Waterfield lot or something with the word Waterfield in the subject line so we'll know what you're talking about and we can route it. So we've had 2 emails, I believe. One of them was a concern about the proximity to the Aberjona and to make sure that the stormwater treatment took into account the protection of the Aberjona. The other comment was from an abutter with concerns about what's happening on the site, and the town has scheduled a meeting with the abutter in early September to discuss their concerns. I think there have been previous meetings with this abutter, so we're going to make sure that all of their concerns have been dealt with. So for now, what I'd like to do for the public comment is, first of all, our recording secretary has asked that everyone who has signed on, please add their last name. And I believe I see everyone has. Great. So that she can properly attribute your comments to you and keep a note of who's attending. So if you would like to make a comment or ask a question, Taylor, can you remind me how long we have for this period? Oh dear, we only have until 8:10. So
No,
let's.
we have till 8:40. Don't we?
Uh,
Oh, no, we
until
don't. No, we don't.
8:10, where we move on to North Main Street.
Yeah, so why don't we do this? Why don't we see how much, let's give as much time as we can to public comment. I was hoping we'd get at least 20 minutes in this evening, but apparently it took longer than I thought. What a
Well,
surprise.
can we try to make sure we hear everybody that showed up tonight and
Yep.
then not more than 20 minutes?
Yep, I agree. That's a
good.
great way. So if you'd like to make a comment, please raise your hand. Please give us your name and your address. So the floor is now open. You will have to raise your hand in order to get unmuted. And I give it a couple minutes for people to push their raise hand function on your Zoom. Or if it's not working for you, turn your video on and wave madly at the screen. Okay, I am not seeing anyone who has raised their hand.
Okay.
Well, if you do have questions, again, send us to planningboard@winchester.us. We will answer your questions and put the question and the answer up on the town's website. And you can reach, if you go to the planning board page, there is a link to on the left bar, which takes you to the Waterfield development. And I think at this point, the next thing we should consider then is at which date we will continue this meeting or this hearing. So our next meeting for this board is on September the 12th.
Go down to the second page of the agenda.
Oh, it's on the second page of the agenda. There it is, Tuesday, September 12th. So why don't, I would recommend that we continue this hearing until Tuesday, September 12th. Same time, 7:30.
And with the specific purpose that we would perhaps by then know what design peer reviewers we considered, or maybe we can even have proposals from them by then. It's 2 weeks from now. If it's possible, we do it, and that's great because then we can get them busy.
Yeah, I think most importantly, we're going to at least put a placeholder in because that's required. And then what we do at that time will evolve based upon if we get some of the peer reviews done by then we can have them make a presentation. We'll certainly have more time for public comment at that meeting. And so.
And one thing is that I know that we had some glitches with links on our website, and if people tried to get to any of the documents associated with this project or any other project in the last week, we knew some of those links weren't functioning and we're working on it. And so if that's the reason why people don't have any comments, then that would be understandable also.
Yes, I believe those links have all been fixed.
Good, that's
At least
great.
the ones that I
Yep.
tried.
All have been resolved unless we've missed more. And if we have missed more, please let us know.
Thank you, Taylor.
Yep, planning board at winchester.us. I say it enough. I sound like one of those 1-800 commercials. Could I get a motion to continue this hearing until a time certain of September 12th at 7:30 p.m.?
I so move.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, roll call vote. Nick?
Aye.
Yi-Ching?
Aye.
Sally?
Aye.
And Dieb says aye as well. I say aye as well. And then I do believe we have to vote to, no, that's it. We're done, I think. We have continued the hearing. So thank you everyone for attending. And we will hopefully, we will get the ball moving as quickly as we can on getting the consultants, the two consultants we approved this evening going.
Great.
So thank you much. Thank you to the Civic on Causeway. Have a great evening. And thank you, Jay. So our next agenda item is a discussion. This agenda item kind of got split up in a bizarre way, but the idea was that we were going to talk today about the proposal from our consultants, Form in Place and Innis Design, in terms of moving forward with the combined North Main Street and META 3A zoning and design guideline package. And so I mistakenly did not put that. The board got a copy of the proposal, but it was not put into the packet. If anyone wants a copy of that, please contact us at planningboard@winchester.us, and we'll make sure you get a copy of that. Taylor, do you want to give us a little bit of background on where we are in terms of how this whole, the RFP process, et cetera, that we have to go through on this?
So we had to put this out to bid. It was over the amount that required us to at least let other contractors, firms post bids. We have not, as of this afternoon, we have not received any further bids besides the one that we will show tonight from Form in Place and Innis Design.
And what was the deadline for the RFP?
It is tomorrow. Deadline is tomorrow.
And if we only get the one, can we proceed, or do we have to go and find?
That's correct. Yes, we can proceed.
Okay, so this is the scope and fee for this contract. Taylor, could you make it a bit wider? Or maybe I should make my screen bigger. Excellent, thank you. So to the board, open it up for your discussion.
So I would comment, first of all, that I like the flow, and I like that some things are happening simultaneous with other things. I like the way she broke it out. Emily and Michael, broke it out into sections. To read this through is sort of simultaneously exhausting, and I'm incredibly grateful that there's someone that is going to help us get through all this work with Taylor, because it's huge. So that's my first initial top take. The community meeting schedules and the discussion about the ZRAC is things that we should probably focus on, and also make sure that the bullet points, if you wanted to really drill down on the bullet points that talk about what the work is, the deliverables in the work, we can drill down on that. But the thing that's very good to see from my view is that it's a well thought out outline with parallel paths getting to success. A good thing. So that's what I have.
Yeah, I agree. It looks like she wants us to form a zoning review and advisory committee. And that probably should have design review, historical housing partnership. And maybe we think about someone from each of those groups to be in there, perhaps Ellen Spencer from design review, maybe Michelle McCarthy from historical and housing partnership. But it looks like that's one of the early on things that we need to deliberate and come up with. And it's a fast pace, but it looks, I agree with Sally that it's heartening to have these people working on this, because it looks like it's a plan that can achieve results.
Hey, Ching? I'm sorry, Nick, I'm sorry. were you
Yeah,
finished?
no, I'm sure I have more, but I'm going to stop for now.
Okay, I wanna come back and ask some questions of everyone. So, Yi Ching, please.
Um, so to give context to people who might not know what's going on, I think that the main point of this this memorandum to help us with the zoning and design guidelines of North Main Street Corridor and MBTA Communities Act. These are two projects that we've been working on for years. Well, the North Main Street for a couple of years now, and then the MBTA Communities Act that we have to implement fairly soon. And so these consultants offering a very outlined way of helping us get to the finish line is incredibly helpful, because I think the 8 months without a planner here was giving us all a lot of anxiety about how to get to the finish line here. And with these very expert consultants here, I think that this will give us a lot of more direction and guidance, and I really appreciate it. And the outline and the time frame does seem very intense, and I appreciate that there is going to be kind of a working group put together to do some of the more behind the scenes work, and then do a lot of public meetings, so that people who want to buy in can get in on it as well. And so I think it's great.
Okay. One of the things that, we had talked about, I know Yi Ching, you had brought up the idea of an MBT 3A working group, which I guess is kind of a zoning review advisory committee, although I kind of see those as two separate things in a way, but obviously they could be combined. One of the things I would like us to think about are people who are community leaders who are not necessarily on town committees that we think might be helpful on that committee. Just because I think that we need to incorporate as much community input at a high level. And I think there are some people in town who have thought about these issues, and that I would welcome, extending it beyond our standard sort of, let's go to each of these committees. I know we all have, we have very strong talents in all those committees, but we do seem to turn to them a lot, and we need to somehow get out to the community.
Diab, can we put it post it as a volunteer opportunity?
I think we would have to, but I think we
is
should
that
also.
going to take us a long time to do because we have to write something?
No, it could take us as, if someone writes something and puts it up, we could get it up tomorrow. I mean, the real question is, I think we want to do that under the umbrella of what in this design inform and place want to do, because they're going to be the ones to say, here are the particular skills we're looking for.
Right. That's
And
very
so,
good.
but yeah, we can certainly, but I think, as we've discovered, asking for volunteers through the town's website can sometimes be a shout to the void. And
well,
so,
not if we also publicize.
Didn't we all provide names to Yi Ching? And I'm wondering if
yes.
that amounted. I mean, I imagine maybe some of them. I mean, I don't know how that would result. I mean, unless you went out to each of them and asked them, and then maybe they said they couldn't do it, or what.
Yeah. So for Taylor's, shoot, sorry, I'm losing my English this evening. So what we did a couple of weeks back is that Yi Ching volunteered to be sort of the contact person to receive suggestions for people to be on the MBT 3A working group. And so those are the names that Nick is talking about. Am I correct, Nick?
Yes. And I submitted one. One was Hank Lynn, who lives in the neighborhood, and it always makes really pointed and astute comments.
So,
but others as well.
I would just like to advocate that we not limit it to people who aren't serving on other boards and councils and commissions right now, because some of those people have very well-informed opinions and are in the sort of flow of participating in community.
Absolutely. I don't think we're limiting. I don't think we're excluding those people, but we are reaching out.
Not at all. Not at all.
Good.
But I like your perspective, Dia, about bringing in people who haven't participated. But I also think that we should really do target people who are in proximity to this location, because I think that this location, historically has been divested from, or, not a lot of, I don't know how the town meeting elections are in those precincts, but I don't know how engaged, a lot of the folks are, but it's going to affect them probably the most. So I think that targeting that community, especially to sort of work with the working group might be very helpful to get
Yeah,
it
so
very.
that would be like making sure that that representatives from all the affected precincts, which I think are three of them, three precincts, is definitely worth the focus. And I think what Diab you said about as part of the kickoff, and you could even probably see it in these kickoff tasks, task 1.1, yeah, 1.1. Isn't this all about coming
Yeah,
up?
if you look at bullet
Yeah,
number
this
four,
is it. So
identify-
1.1, they're gonna do this whole thing, identify stakeholders.
Yeah,
And obviously we with them will do this whole thing.
yeah, and
It's
I
right
think,
here.
yeah, so I encourage, I mean, there are so many different people who I think would be valuable to this, and definitely people, like I said, the people on town committees have a lot of expertise, and we certainly want them, but we've got a lot of people in town who think deeply about these things, and
Right,
want to
especially in
drag
the
them
affected
kicking and
precincts.
screaming to evening meetings out of their comfy chairs.
Mm.
Right.
So anything that is, so one of the things, and I apologize for not writing notes on this. I know one of the big things is the concern about design review and design guidelines. Reading over this scope of work, is that addressed to the
This is in
level?
task 4.
Yeah,
In task 4, it's 4.1 and 4. Well, yes, it's 4.1, 2, and 3.
yeah, and it's, yeah,
I guess
so
it's 4.3 is what it is, right there.
right. So my notes were to see whether how, in any case, are those sufficient to
Can you scroll up
meet the board's concerns? Because I know that is,
other way?
Scroll up.
Yeah,
The
well, I know I
3?
always say it backwards. I'm sorry.
let's look at page 4.
Yeah, 4.1. I mean, we're
There
gonna
it
want
is.
to come
There
up
it
with.
is. 4.3 and 4.4, right there.
Right. So
Right.
are these, is the
We're- we're-
language
we're-
in there
Yeah, I mean,
sufficient?
we're gonna want to come up with some permissible form-based zoning criteria or guidelines or standards. I think we have to figure that out. And we're gonna have to figure out, what is too ambiguous.
Right. So I just want to make sure that your concerns are captured in this document. So that, if
So
you.
they're
if you-
for both initiatives with including community and committee input.
I think the concerns are based on the result, but hopefully if there's a forum for having a conversation, I
Yeah,
think
that's
that,
what
Right.
she's proposing.
yeah.
So for instance, I don't recall there being a specific guideline, a version of the ZRAC, which is specific to the design guidelines.
I don't
Right.
understand I don't
Well,
understand what you
so
just said.
the design guidelines being part of the zoning review, is that what
I
the?
think that the design guidelines and the zoning review are kind of, I see them not quite separate, but certainly bringing different types of expertise. And so I think that if you wanted to have, I mean, one of the.
I don't know. I mean, I think that if we're talking about zoning, you want to talk about form-based zoning. And so that's very much a part of this. I mean,
Yeah,
I imagine.
I don't think we have the capacity to manage more than one advisory board for this project, and so.
Yeah, I
There's
think
gonna
we
be
need to.
people on, say it's a 9-person advisory body. Some of them will be really focused on the design side. Some of them will be really focused on aspects having to do with transportation or road safety or whatever.
Okay.
I
mean,
think it's
if
okay to
this-
have one
if
board.
that-
I
if
just
that-
think it's really important that the zoning review advisory committee know that within their purview is to advise us on these guidelines,
Okay.
these
That's-
standards or whatever.
I
Yeah.
just wanted to see whether that, if you're comfortable with having the ZRAC be the board to review the
Well,
whole package.
I am. I don't mean to speak for everybody. Sorry.
No, I agree that I don't think we have the capacity for more than one side group. And I think it's important for everyone to be in the conversation, and whether or not their particular specialties are at the fore of every single conversation.
Right. I mean, there's, I think that while we would wish to do some form-based code, I'm not sure we have the budget for that. Because
all right, but I don't want to hear too much negativity this early on. So let's do the best we can.
No. I just so form-based coding is, I think, separate from the design guidelines. It's a particular way of approaching your zoning. And I know that we have talked about doing that over the years. I just, I think we can look to other communities and see what they've done with form-based, but my understanding when Brian looked into this previously was that if we want to do a fully form-based code, which is different from the way our zoning is done, it's essentially orthogonal to how we normally do zoning, that's we will try to incorporate that, I think.
I think that what Michael has often talked about with us is a hybrid version of that. And
Yeah.
I think that we haven't had the time or the capacity to really explore what the options are. But I would just like to, well, the first thing is I want clarity on the thing that I understand is in the housing and livable communities, or it's the MBTA 3A guidelines about the design guidelines cannot be certain things and they must be certain things. And they cannot be subjective and they must be realistic or achievable. They can't be economically infeasible. Just what exactly that language is will really help guide us.
I would like to explore it with the guidance of Michael Wang and the other gentleman.
John.
And I mean, thinking about the cost, whatever this hybrid that they may recommend may be the path. It's too soon to just say we can't do it. I think we need to learn about it.
Well, I encourage everyone on the board to take a deep dive into form-based codes. And I'm sure Taylor can help us figure out what the heck it all means. I know that.
Well, if you don't mind, if I can step in for a second, there's nothing in this proposal that tells me we don't have the opportunity to ask questions and learn from these experts. I think we absolutely have the capacity. I know this will move quickly. If we move forward with this will move rather quickly. But we have the opportunity to ask questions and learn up front about what may be best for the community. I don't think having a sit down with them and saying, hey, what's your early recommendations on if we should be exploring form-based code or not is an outlandish question here.
Yeah, and I think what Dieb's point is if we try to make our whole zoning bylaw form-based, that's a major multi-$1,000 exercise that we don't have the capacity or the priority to do right now. But the hybrid,
and I completely understand that. Yeah,
and the hybrid version is an option.
I completely understand. Yeah.
One thing I want to focus our attention on is in this screen that we're looking at right here, in task 4.2. Let me see if I can find it. Oh, task 4.3. In the first. Oh, yes, the second bullet, draft the framework for the tests, the design guidelines. There was another word in here that had to do with, well, I guess this is it. I mean, I have confidence that they will be able to guide this process. I mean, it has to start with our telling them what we believe the reason for these design guidelines is. And I don't know that the planning board has done that yet. And I thought there was language in here that talked about that. But I'm not seeing it right now, so never mind about that.
I mean, that might be where I see John Shabir has his hand raised, and
Yes,
I want to make a comment which may or may not cut John off, and that is, one of the things I don't think is in here is talking about increasing the inclusionary zoning and getting work on doing the fiscal analysis to show that we can do that and thereby increase the percentage of inclusionary zoning that we can do in MBTA 3A. I don't know if that is orthogonal to this effort or is it has to be a key part of it, but I don't believe that's in here. And if the board wants to hear from John, I'm sure. Or does the board want to keep
Oh,
talking?
yeah, I'd love to hear from John.
Okay,
Sorry.
John, I think you should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted.
Yes, you are.
Comment actually did not have anything to do with inclusionary zoning, but I was going to build on Sally Dale's comment a minute or so ago. The words I'm not seeing on the screen is a site plan review, and the Housing and Livable Communities will allow site plan review for any development within the 3A district or the 3A area. And I think it would be very useful to the town to have a kind of written description of what exactly would be could be conducted within a site plan review, what's within the limits of the site plan review, what's outside the limits of the site plan review, that's related to the design.
So we're allowed to have a site plan review,
Yes.
and if so, I mean, it just can't be binding in certain ways.
You can.
And if so, by all means, I mean, we should have that right in here. I mean, that should be up forefront.
Well, but first of all, I want to point out we do actually have site plan review already in the Center Business District. So what we should.
But we have to connect it to this plan in a way that is understandable.
We would connect it to all the 3A overlay districts.
Right. We have to draw the dotted line.
Is the
Yeah.
existing, I mean, one of the key provisions is that these have to be as of right development.
Right.
But that can include site plan review. So the question is the existing site plan review definition compatible and consistent with
Yes.
what Housing and Livable Communities?
I think we ought to make sure that that's the case, that it will be called on in each instance. That we should be redundant, I think.
Yeah, I think so currently site plan review comes in the CBD, for instance, if you develop more than a certain size parcel. So it is even if you have a by right development, it kicks in. So, I mean, I think the outside of the CBD, I believe site plan review only comes in if if there are certain things that you're doing to your property, like changing the grade, or if you are in residential areas, there's different sort of, no, actually, the change of grade also works in non-residential areas.
So,
because
but Dia, if someone's doing
I think it's
development in another overlay district of 3A, because there's 3 little pockets, right?
Mhm.
Or 3 districts, they're called, sub-districts. Would those properties in those sub-overlay districts be subject to site plan review by virtue of being in an overlay district related to 3A?
No, we would have to examine what the site plan review are in each of those districts.
Right, I
And
think that's what
I think-
John is asking, if we have to change things.
Yeah, I think that,
I think we have to make sure, because
Yeah.
maybe that our site plan review isn't applicable, or there's some legal thing where it's not going to work. So I think we have to make sure that the site plan review that we have for 3A is a viable, is redundantly specified.
yeah, okay, I apologize. When I think of revising the zoning, I immediately consider site plan review as part of the basic zoning that we would always include. So I apologize if I didn't make that clear. So,
Also, but if you're in a residential district,
Mhm.
or if you're in GBD 2 or 3, the site plan review, let me not ask about residential. The site plan review for GBD 2 and 3 is what? What's required?
we'd have to go to the zoning right now and
Okay,
see
well,
what
so
it
we won't
is.
do that right now, but the
Yeah,
general idea here
yeah,
is
but
incorporate
so,
it.
so all I meant to say is that we do have site plan review. We have criteria Yes, I agree. We need to make sure that they work. I just wanted to say, we're not starting from scratch here. That's all I wanted to say.
And yeah, my suggestion is that I would just put the word site, I would integrate somewhere in here the 3 words site plan review and how that's conducted and when it's conducted.
Yeah, I agree. I think it should be
I mean,
a
I think
checkbox.
the other thing that we need to look at with this, and is something that, comes up often when we consider historical resources in the town center, is the protections we have for them and where they belong. And I don't know if this goes in here. So for instance, if you tear down a building which is, labeled red on our historic resources map, then in the CBD regulations, it says that the planning board will look with prejudice upon any application within 5 years of tearing it down.
But I really strongly think we should just forget about those. Let's just look at what we have and make it as strong as we can to protect historic properties.
Well, we
Well,
don't have
wait,
to
wait,
get
wait,
rid
wait.
of.
Knowing that we already have those, but I don't want to introduce sort of contradictory.
I'm not looking for contradictions, Nick. I'm asking whether they should be put into the zoning bylaws so they're not guidelines, or maybe there's another way of strengthening them. I don't want to
see.
contradict them. I'm trying
Okay.
to, so I'm not against preserving historical structures. I don't know why people think that, but I'm not. I live in an 1897 house and I'm very glad. But the concern that people have about protection of historic resources, I think a lot of people don't understand the protections we already have. And it may be because they are in the guidelines. And to be honest, we discussed these at a cohort meeting on Monday with some of our MBTA 3A cohort communities, and they were actually kind of surprised at the
Right. I guess can I just add that some of the properties, some of the older wood frame houses on Church Street were among the ones that we suggested that we take off the map. And yes, I understand that they have the 5-year waiting period, but I would, and for a future conversation, I'm going to argue that having it by right on X, Y, or Z particular building puts undue commercial pressure in spite of the 5 years. I don't think we should rely on the 5 years. I think we also have to think about, in certain instances, whether we want to have certain historic buildings on the map. But again, that's a future conversation. I don't want to take up the time, but I think we need to.
Well, if Nick,
have
if
that
you think this is
point.
important in terms of this, then I think you should discuss it, but.
No, it's not part of MBTA 3A design guidelines and zoning consultants proposed scope, I don't think.
Okay.
Stella, you're on mute.
I'm sorry, it's relevant to the extent that we're talking about anything that we want the consultants to add as a point of consideration for this proposal. And one of them was whether we want to specifically address the treatment of historic buildings that are within these overlay districts.
Right, I mean, I think we've made some recommendations, and I
Yes.
wasn't prepared to speak about those.
No, and I don't think
For
this
this
is the right
meeting.
time to do it. We're talking about the proposal right now. and
Right.
No,
About
I
the
just-
bullet items in the proposal.
Right.
Right.
So I don't see, like, what I think I led with was, I don't recall seeing a discussion of historic preservation in this proposal in terms
So-
of,
On task 4.3, first bullet, develop draft framework for guidelines, okay? We would put into the framework for these guidelines, inclusionary housing, no, excuse me, not in the design guidelines, but certainly the treatment of historic structures.
well, those are design guidelines. I don't think those will not help us in terms of preservation.
No, but they're kind of linked.
Well, okay, then it's the whole
Conceptually. I mean,
framework. If you scroll up
Right.
to where we're
Well,
drafting the zoning, develop the draft zoning framework. Table is to task 4.1. the draft zoning framework, we would ask if it can include a review of ways that we can be very clear in our direction about how historic buildings that do fall within MBTA 3A overlay district, and they're actually on the 3A district map, how those buildings are to be addressed.
So.
Well,
so-
yes. I don't want to exclude the conversation about the list of buildings that we've recommended to take off the map. But I don't know how that fits into this.
That-
I'm assuming that we will have that conversation.
Nick, I don't think there's a problem with the buildings you've identified, as long as if you have, good reasons. The key is we have enough flexibility to accommodate those.
Mhm.
So I don't think I don't see any controversy about those additions or subtractions, as long as we maintain the number of units and the
Right.
total area. And so, as you pointed out in your list that the rest of the world hasn't seen yet, 666 Main Street was supposed to be on there, but wasn't. So that gives us a little
Right.
extra. So I
Right.
don't see that.
And
as-
we're above the 1220. I mean, that's something else we want to talk about in terms of the optics of the whole thing.
Yeah, I'm a little unclear who has the skills to do the calculations when we switch out one property with another, because it's all about the numbers.
It's all about the numbers, but I believe that, this is a technical issue in terms of, if we have to reach out to a consultant to do that, if we determine we can't do it in-house.
Well, Taylor
Then-
might already know how you do, how
so
you use
that's-
the compliance
Yeah,
model.
so I think that's an offline discussion.
Okay,
Yeah.
But I want to point out that whatever we put in for historic protections cannot, we have to be very careful, because you can't come at it directly and say, if you're in an overlay district in your historic building, you can't do X, Y, or Z, because you can't do that. You have to say every property which is in an overlay district has to be handled uniformly. So you can't say, so you can put in protections on the side like what we have in terms
Right.
of,
I think these buildings are on the edge, so it just kind of changes the shape a little bit.
yeah, but again,
that's-
we have them scattered all. I think it's, when you look at the reason why, for instance, the historical preservation is done the way it is downtown, is because it is one way of approaching this without a local historic district, which we have tried and failed to get traction for. It's without an extra demolition delay, which
Right. I mean, there may be traction now that all this is on the line.
I think what you're going to find is that we haven't heard from the building owners in the CBD who don't want to have restrictions on their properties. So I think there's a tension between the different stakeholders as to where that balance is. And so that's one
Right.
thing that we haven't had that
That's true. I mean,
discussion.
that certainly is an issue. I mean, ultimately it's up to town meeting, I think, but
I mean, if it turns out that, we make we have to, so this is a complex issue.
I mean that it's an issue that was brought up on at the historical commission, and it's sort of something that is being batted around and resurrecting that committee regards to the local historic district and the center business district. I mean, and Jack Lemenage did give us the history of the fact that the building owners weren't that enthusiastic at the time, and then we were saying, well, there's a different incentive now. I mean, so something might be happening. I'm not, I'm not kind of on the edge of my seat, but I think it's something that we should kind of be open-minded if it doesn't materialize.
Yeah.
well,
So-
and one very good point that was made is about stakeholders, and the stakeholders include business and property owners in the overlay districts. And that's a great outreach task for our new town planner.
Taylor, you got so much on your plate. So
Right.
just keep adding more. It's like going to
Well,
Olive
it's all
Garden,
part of
just
the
a never-ending
same
buffet.
continuum that we're talking about right here.
Yeah, there is a small role for the planner to play in reconvening the group that was working on the center business district, historic district.
Yeah, I mean,
But I don't think that would be a huge,
Well, Nick, I don't see Taylor's involvement in rolling out 3A education and community engagement as small.
No, you're right. You're right. And given that this may be an important part of that, then I think you're correct in saying that it's an important function.
It's extremely
So
important.
so just to move on, I think we can all agree that we need to amend some parts of this to include discussion of approaches to historical preservation. And that should probably go into draft zoning. We want to include in the draft design guidelines, we want to talk about design review, site plan review, and what components are appropriate to the different districts, because they may be different, because certainly we know the GBD2 is not the same as a CBD, but we do want to have some continuity so it's not too weird. Anything else that might be missing in this that we should add to make sure, because this is actually going to be the thing that we're going to
You're
look
asking
at.
us to look into our crystal ball and find out what's going to be
Well,
contentious.
the thing
3
we're
weeks' time.
actually talking about is the word framework on task 4.1, first bullet.
So let's make sure that we identify those the important. Right now we know there are a couple of things that are important to us. We put it in here, we won't forget about it.
That's right. And I agree
Okay.
with you, Diab, that we should add that they would explore ways to incorporate into the draft zoning how we approach historic properties. And it can't be any different, but it has to be noted that they are distinct category of
Yeah,
properties. And also integrate how site plan review will work in
Right.
overlay district properties that would otherwise not be subject to site plan review.
Right.
The other thing is that I don't know where it fits in is the inclusionary housing component, and maybe it doesn't fit in here at all.
I can't speak to that at all.
I don't know. So maybe we should bounce it off of them and see.
Oh, John raised his hand.
John raised his hand again. I said inclusionary housing. Go ahead, John.
I was hoping to be quiet, and I had just written myself a note to email you tomorrow. I would keep the inclusionary zoning out of this, in that with respect to the economic feasibility analysis, in particular, HLC has their own list of consultants that they want to review and approve to conduct that work. So, I mean, it would, in some ways, it would be convenient to have that all in here. But I don't think these two firms have that capability that they're looking for. At the same time, you know, this obviously the zoning has to interface with what's ever decided on for inclusionary zoning. So, I mean, I think it has to be aware of the inclusionary zoning, but I would keep the inclusionary zoning, what you referenced earlier, in terms of the financial analysis or that feasibility assessment. I would actually keep that separate.
Okay.
Helpful comment.
Yeah, I was just wondering if they could just, as a subcontract, do it, but I think.
Yeah, no, I thought that was an interesting suggestion, and I sat here and pondered it, and eventually concluded that I would actually keep that separate.
Well, the board, I think, values your opinion and will act one way or other upon it.
So Diab, should we just take less than 20 seconds to explain what economic feasibility analysis is about for those
Sure.
who might not be clear?
Sure. Taylor, you want to have a go at this, or? Don't want to put
No.
you on the
Do
spot.
you want me to do it?
Yes.
Essentially, what Housing and Livable Community is saying is that they will allow inclusionary zoning, but they will only allow 10% of the units at 80% of the Boston area median income. What they're concerned with is that some communities may put in a higher percentage than 10% and may have a lower income threshold, such as 60%. As far as I can determine in my conversations, the second part of Winchester's inclusionary housing inclusionary zoning says that for buildings larger than 24 units, 25 and above units, an additional and separate 5% is calculated for incomes between 80% and 120%. And what HLC has determined is that we need to justify that requirement will not make a building infeasible or impossible to construct. And my response to them was, we've had two proposals, one for 654 Main Street, one for 10 Converse Place, both of which handled that requirement without question. So what we need to do is to essentially develop at least one, perhaps two financial pro formas that demonstrate that additional requirement is not going to make it impossible to build a building. There's some other nuances that I've raised in the CHAPA discussions in there, and that I think are worthwhile looking at. But I think in terms of a general meeting, that's an introduction. That the cost,
Right, so that's really
cost
helpful.
of economic feasibility of an EFA is probably at the minimum 10,000, maybe 15,000. The high end estimate is 25,000.
Does the town have to conduct them as examples, like theoretical case studies?
That's the way the guidelines work.
Okay, so in that
but we
case,
could-
and
I mean, the other
since we're
thing is that
keeping these out of the zoning sections that we're working on, it's sort of out of the planning board's purview right now, is that right?
It's within our purview because we have to make the decision whether we want to put it in the zoning or not. I think that the state has also, I believe, announced grant programs to allow us to get some money from them to pay for it if we want to move forward.
No, it seems that John had originally suggested that we not include it, and it seems to me that we ought to, we're already dealing with a very complex system, and maybe we should exclude it and handle it in a separate way so as to.
Well, I think that, yeah, so what I don't know is that whether the state will accept it piecemeal. I don't know.
Right,
That's-
the main point for us is to make sure that our zoning guidelines for our overlay districts for the multifamily by right don't trigger in the state's assessment of our work that we can't say that unless we show economic feasibility for it. So
I think there's an interface with how inclusionary zoning is treated. I think that's a deeper discussion.
yeah.
And you're already 10 minutes over the guideline.
And I just wanted to make sure
Sure.
that the subject was broached, but I don't think we can talk about it now any more than this.
And I just want to put an exclamation point on what Diab said about finance. The Mass Housing Partnership Board, Mass Housing Partnership has money. They will fund these analyses. They want to control, who does the work. So all of
Good.
that analysis and justification, I think, can be done separate from this contract, but it obviously has to interface with it.
So we just need someone to write the grant.
Excuse me? I think the grant,
We
is
would
gonna
need
be-
somebody to write the grant application to MHP.
I think Taylor can do it, I can do it. I think it's very simple, it's very straightforward. It's not, I don't anticipate that it's heavy lifting.
Great. Okay, thank you for helping explain that.
Okay. If we're all, I think we have our additions to this, and if
Well,
there's
and
any,
so the next question is, are they gonna up their fee?
no,
Okay, good.
I
don't
think that this is just, we're just being specific about what we want them to include. I think they're very
Okay.
aware of what they need to put
Yeah,
in.
yeah.
So,
Good.
so I know that there are, before we move on to ADUs and our last segment on performance goals, we had last week, the state released some revisions to the MBTA 3A, just a couple weeks after I assured another board chair that they would never do that. But what they did last week is they released, Taylor, can you, I think it's in the document, it's in our packet somewhere.
This is the
And
but for document, right?
this is the but for document. So what it does is it says that if you have
Can you make it bigger?
a mixed use district, which is residential plus commercial, that you can include the units in that, in, you know, if you in that district towards your total number of units. There are other constraints on those commercial units. So for instance, you can't require a minimum parking for them. You have to allow second floor and above multifamily by right. But the key provision here is that it says that you cannot include the area of those districts in the total area required by 3A.
No, you can't include the area of the parcel.
Of the parcel. You can include the units, but not the area. So this doesn't really give us much extra flexibility in terms of how we handle the downtown, for instance, because we've already decided to exclude, this was designed, there are several communities which are very worried, like we are, about the loss of first floor commercial if you've made everything multifamily by right. And that's one of the reasons, or the main reason, I think, is we went down all of the commercial avenues in the CBD, and we removed most, not all, but most of the properties from our overlay district so that we knew that we would always have first floor commercial. Some other communities were vocal enough that the state decided to change the regulations to make some of those units up to 25% available to count towards the total number of units. Now, we don't have a problem with unit numbers. We never had. We have excluded, I think we can exclude almost all of the commercial from downtown that we want to. So this doesn't give us any extra flexibility, which is unfortunate. It doesn't, so
which is to say that it doesn't really apply to us, and because we don't need that level of flexibility because we have buffers in most of our numbers.
One
Yeah.
of the buildings that we excluded, we did so, and this was Kerry's suggestion, because we didn't want to lose the first floor where the bagels are.
Which,
Oh.
that was in your memo.
bagels
Main
are
Street.
important, yes.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that's,
we didn't want to lose the idea being that was an important street hub of activity.
You don't mean the Bruger Bagel building. You mean the brick one beyond it.
No, the Bruger Bagel building.
the triple B building.
Is it really a historic building?
No, it's not historic, but
commercial.
Kerry wanted it in there because she wanted to make sure that it didn't go all residential.
So it's a, yeah, so that's perfectly fine. I mean, that's what we did in a lot of other parts. So the point is, though, that we're not, this new change that the state rolled out last week doesn't really help us. We're already easily in compliance with the numbers.
Right.
And so, and it doesn't allow us to shift anything around in the CBD. I think what would allow us to do is maybe reduce density in other places, but you know, this is really aimed at a section of the city. If we already had significant, yeah, this just doesn't work for us. But
I find one thing I do find interesting is that other communities are fighting back, and not that we would, but we should give some thought to the idea that when things get contentious, we may have something to fight back on, and it may be something that we should we should consider doing.
Well, you should know that when this first came to the town, Brian Zakeli wrote, and we can find it, a very specific critique, as did
Right.
town planners from every associated town. And that's the reason why it took a long time for the guidelines to get published, is because they were the subject of tremendous input from municipalities.
Right, right.
So I should note that the reason this went through is apparently because there are several very large municipalities. And so so I think the key thing is that
Anyway,
we
that's
can
just an
use-
aside.
yeah, so the key thing is we can get to compliance without, I think, a lot of pain.
Yes.
So I think that, we're not some of these other communities.
We can get to compliance without a lot of pain, but I think optically, we need to kind of acknowledge, for the sake of town meeting, that this is a hardship and that we're not all gleeful that we're going to have all these by right apartment blocks downtown, that we are dealing with a difficult situation and we're going to do the best we can to get through it. I realize that it's pretty easy for us, but it doesn't appear that way to everyone. So I think we just have to be cognizant of,
I
you
think
know,
we
the
also,
fact that it's a bitter pill for many.
I think we have to be careful because we're not going to get apartment blocks. That's not what's going to happen. We're going to get someone who goes
Okay,
in.
I won't use it. I'll refrain to you. It's been suggested to me to refrain from using
But
certain terms. And
I
so maybe
just
I
want
should.
to, yeah, because I want to, what we're going to get, is we're going to get some buildings that we may not get new buildings. So for instance, if for some reason, Winchester, or some of the larger, like the banks downtown decide to go out of business because for whatever reason, and they get redeveloped as multifamily, they're not going to tear those buildings down. They're going to reuse them. So
Right.
I think the key is that we're looking at reuse, and there are certainly some
Right,
places.
I understand that there are a lot of arguments you can make. I just think we should be sensitive
Yes.
to the idea that it's not a walk in the park, that there is a little bit of pain, even though you're arguing that there isn't that much.
Related to that, I think if we can scroll down a little bit, Taylor, to number 4, remarkable in this letter from the state is that it's going to add a list of 13 discretionary grant programs to section 9 and that we would not be eligible to get those grants should we not comply, right? So I acknowledge
Right.
I acknowledge that demographic that you're talking about, Nick, and
Right.
I think definitely in preparation for town meeting, we need to understand how much money this would be giving up, or
Right,
how much money.
right. I mean, I don't want to be in the
Hold on a
position.
second, Nick, please. I just would like to know how much money we are getting from these various plus 13. I forget what was in the first.
The MassWorks portal is dozens and dozens of grant.
Right. So like over time, how much has our community been taking from these grant programs? And then how much would we be giving up? I just think that is good facts to just present.
That's
for
important.
either side.
It's important. I mean, I think that in
Just
any
to know what the costs are.
Yeah, no, I think that's very important. I personally, I mean, in any situation, whether it's realistic or not, you have to feel that you can walk away. And I mean, that's just
Okay, so then how much are we walking away from? I would like to know. That's all, Nick.
right. And not that we would do it, and not that we could even contemplate it, but I don't want to have
But you are.
and no one wants to have a gun
And
to
we
their head.
acknowledge that there are people who are. So like
Right,
let's look at the pros and cons and let's look at the cost
Right.
analysis,
Sure.
and make a very, very calculated decision on which way to go.
That's a
Also,
very
I
good
want to add this, the Commonwealth knows that putting zoning in place doesn't mean that things are going to change overnight. Once something is zoned for, there are potential property developers who go through a long process of, site identification and evaluation and analysis and modeling and the whole thing. Things don't happen overnight. But what we're doing is we're putting in place zoning that would allow the thoughtful addition of more density in certain districts. And I don't expect this to, we're going to wake up the morning after town meeting and there's a new building on every blade of grass. It's a process that we have to put the groundwork in place for. Right?
It's a good, yeah.
I think all we have, well, not all we have to do, but simply look at the CBD regs were changed, or zoning was changed, what, 10 plus years ago, or around 10 years ago? And
You saying the
since then,
2018? Not that one.
2015.
2015. And
Yes, it was
so we've
2015
seen,
vote.
we've seen essentially one building get built downtown since then, and that's the Elmwood one. And I know that there have been a couple which have been approved by this board, but they haven't gone anywhere. So I think zoning takes a long time to get, and certainly we can't predict what's going to happen in 20 years, but you know, if it's a condo building, you can bet it's never going to change because you have to buy out every single person. I mean, there's all of these things which add into whether or not a particular lot will ever get rebuilt or
Right.
renovated. So I know John has his hand up, but I think we do have to move on.
Yeah, it's 9 o'clock.
Yeah, we have one really quick.
Just the ADU. Do we have to vote on the ADU?
We
Or
have,
is that
I
just
think
an update?
we have, well, so the ADU, so I want to just give it, I think we need to vote on, so we have language. Shoot, I don't believe that.
I
It's
don't
not in
think
the
I
packet.
saw language.
No,
For a
nothing in the
warrant
packet.
article?
Is it the Warren article language? Was that in the packet or not? I can't
No.
remember.
That's,
Shoot.
are we getting up to the deadline for that?
Well, the deadline, the last deadline is the 22nd, but I think we do need to talk about when we're going to schedule our hearing. And let me
The
find,
22nd of what?
it's the 22nd of September is when
Oh, okay,
they have
because
to be
today
in.
happens to be a 22nd.
Yeah, yes, so it's not today, excuse me, luckily. But so we reached out to town council to talk about two things. One was, is it really true that the state defines people with disability as turning into senior citizens at the age of 60? And the answer is pretty much yes. And therefore that does leave us with this gap in our ADU bylaw. Whereas if you are a person with a disability living in an ADU, when you turn the age of 60, all of a sudden you are no longer legally able to use the ADU. You have to wait for 2 years.
Yeah.
Which is, I think we can all acknowledge that's pretty silly.
That's the best explanation I've heard of this.
So we are now, we asked town council, the first question was, is this really true? His answer was surprisingly yes. And that's what we heard from our good friend Kathy Boyle. The other question was, what are the words we would need to put into the zoning bylaw to bring this up to spec, not spec. So
To
let
make
me-
it legally,
to make it properly, yeah, and so
Mhm.
let me, Taylor, I don't know if I share my screen, everything's gonna get all messed up again, but let's try again.
why don't
Taylor,
you email Taylor what you have?
yeah, I will email Taylor what I have. I don't.
We're so modern.
Okay, Taylor. I'm about to send it to you. My computer's thinking about it. It has sent it to you. So he recommended two very small changes. One was simply to change the age of that we consider for our senior population from 62 to 60, so that the gap abuts, or there is no gap.
Mhm.
And then there was
Is it just this email, or is there a document?
No, it's just the email. He just has, there's at the top of the email, he has a couple of changes in red.
So it should be pretty simple and easy to explain at fall town meeting. And we just have to make sure we get it into the warrant before the warrant deadline, which is a month away. And we have to have a public hearing about this before then. Is that correct?
That's the way we have typically done it. So I would suggest that, yeah.
So the task at hand is to schedule the meeting and finalize the
Yeah.
wording, right?
If you could somehow make that really big, Taylor. I don't know how. So the key question was that we wanted to clarify, there we go. That the housing option
that's the
Oh,
was
best
in
thing to
either
do.
the primary or accessory unit. And there was some confusion in the language, I think, as to,
It's intended to be either.
yeah, it's intended to be either, and this simply,
Yes, okay, so this is the only thing we need to do?
this is, as far as town council is concerned, this addresses two concerns that have been expressed in the past, one about the age and also about clarifying the language so it's more obvious.
That looks fairly simple to me, but as we know from past experience, what looks simple to us isn't always so simple. So, so the only time that we have before then is just the 12th, right? September 12th.
I think if we schedule our hearing on the 12th, if we agree that with this language, then we can go ahead and post it. So I guess I would be asking the board to approve this language, to approve putting this, there's some magic wording. So we're not approving the language yet because we haven't gone through the public hearing process, but we are approving putting this motion on the town warrant subsequent to further revisions through our listening to people at the public hearing.
And the hearings happen right after the warrant gets published, right?
The hearings happen before the warrant gets published.
Before, okay, so.
So the only meeting is September 12th we have.
So
Yes,
you're asking us to vote if we agree with this language enough to keep moving forward.
that's correct.
I do.
I second that.
I'm certainly comfortable with this because to be honest, I don't know that we have another option.
No, we don't. And Nick, what do you think?
I mean, I don't think we have another option either.
Okay.
I mean, it's just the state disability laws are such a mess.
So
Yeah.
once we get this settled, the next thing to do is to figure out the best way to tell the story at town meeting.
Yep.
And I think that folks from the ADU working group can help Taylor, and one of us can be engaged and move it
Yeah.
forward.
Well, they'll have to wake them up again. They're on hiatus for the summer. So why don't, if I can get a motion to move forward with this article for the fall 23 town meeting, and that we will have a public hearing on this on September the 12th. And I think we're going to have to put it, I don't know that we have to do a time certain because we'll do that whenever we post it. So
Okay,
if
I move that.
is there a second?
Yes, second.
Okay, so roll call, Nick,
Hey,
Sally,
Yes.
I Ching.
Aye.
Okay. Oh, I say aye as well. Sorry, forgot about myself. So so this is great. So we'll have a public hearing on this, and hopefully by then we'll also know if there are any other zoning articles on the town warrant, so that we can, because we typically, the planning board is supposed to review any other zoning articles. We're not the only ones who can put them on the warrant, but
Ah,
I
good to know.
I don't know of any zoning article which hasn't been put forward by the planning board, but we are required to hold hearings on them and review them.
That's a great fine point.
Yes, I mean, anyone can put something on the town warrant if they get enough signatures. So, okay, so then we're running a little late, but that's usual. So Taylor, if you could pop over to our agenda and remind us where we should have been half an hour ago. Okay, so we are now only 12 minutes late. So one of the things that's important to do is to understand what our goals and objectives are, certainly in terms of knowing, for the town planner, certainly in terms of knowing that Taylor has to take some amount of time to come up to speed. And so far, Taylor hasn't been complaining, but we'll see. So what we do have is, as part of our revision of the planner description, we came up with an amended or revised duties, performance goals, and these include all sorts of things in there. And I think what's important is that we understand moving forward what's actually realistic to expect within the next, 4 or 5 months. Now, one of the things I'm not sure of right now is, I know that the town typically has all of their annual performance reviews being done in January. And I know we had talked about a 6-month review, but the town may require us to do a review in January. So I think that
I think we can agree to do one in January, and it's not required, but it's what we'll do because it gets him in phase with all of that.
Okay. I
I
mean,
think-
it's,
I kind of see this as setting up looking at everything that's on this list that we know is going to happen between now and January, and between January and next August, which is his 1-year anniversary, right?
Right.
So
so
just put it in and say, you have to do these things in this quarter and whatever, like make the work plan.
well, I'm thinking we just need to look at what needs to be done between now and January,
Okay,
because when it comes in January, we will have we'll be back in cycle for the full next year.
I see. Oh, I get it. Okay.
And so
ahead.
if we're going to do a review, we should do it based on what's possible within the next 4 months. So I'm already thinking, like, for instance, create an annual report for inclusion in the annual report of the town is probably not something that's worthwhile thinking about.
Right.
Some of the things that we're going to be so busy with 3A and North Main Street. Maybe there are some things that certainly, if we go, unless we can go right down these things. I think staff support is all pretty much. I hope we don't have another subdivision between now and January, but I think we're okay on that. Certainly fostering good relations, etc. The next bullet, research, prepare studies, that's pretty general and vague one. I'm sure that things that come into play in terms of 3A and the CBD, etc., will fall underneath that. Certainly the next one, I think identify, recommend zoning bylaw revisions falls underneath that. Studies, reports, and presentations. I don't see a lot of that happening just because
I think we can pick things out of here that are specific, that we know that we're going to do between now and January. We've got all this community outreach stuff, and the most immediate 5-month goals can be found in all the projects that we're working on, as long as they're on this list.
Right, but I would say, why don't we just cross out the ones we know can't possibly happen, and then everything else is a fruit fly. Sorry, I'm waving at fruit flies.
Well, I wouldn't say that you have to cross things out. It's just that there's specific examples. So staff all meetings and planning and public hearings of the planning board, we can say these are the dates between now and 5 months from now. And for every single one of those dates, you will do all these things. That's the first example. And then for special permit granting authority, we know that we have Waterfield, and for any others that come up in the next 5 months, right? And in its role as advisory board, right? That's the memo that goes out, and he can do that every month, right? And so I'm just giving examples of specific known deliverables that will happen on a particular date in the next 5 months, or generally over the next 5 months, but specifically the particular date ones. You can just say those things have to happen. Goals and objectives, make sure this happens.
I agree with you.
Okay, good. So
I'm saying that I think that staff and support and the work of the planning board, that's implicit in everything that's going to happen.
Okay.
And so I'm just, I don't want to make this
I just don't want to take anything out of such a carefully crafted job description.
Well, it's not, it's a performance plan, but just to make sure we get the terminology right. So why don't we move on to the next page?
Okay.
I think,
Sorry.
no, I just, I think um, does the rest of the board feel like we should be, are we just going to say come January, we will take into account the short period of time that Taylor's worked with us and, the fact he has to come up to speed in a short amount of, in this amount of time and just simply waive some of these requirements? And not,
It seems to me that you, Deb, and Sally are going to be working with Taylor on a day-to-day basis, and you're going to have to make many of these decisions as to what he's going to be prioritized with. I mean, and
I think, oh, yeah, good, Nick.
I mean, I guess to the extent that are you asking to, I guess, redo this thing, or maybe at the end of the period, you just use a handicap, given the circumstances, or use judgment. I don't know. I mean,
I don't want to say that we're going to say, did Taylor do 5/12 of a good job? Or did he do a good job for 5/12 of the year? I'd rather us talk about exactly what we know is a realistic thing, that we're specific and realistic and agreed upon. Like
so Nick,
staffing all the stuff with Emily and managing the board.
right. Yeah.
meetings,
Okay.
all that
I'll
stuff.
step back. I mean, I'm not sure what we're doing, but I
In
think
the
I would
first
step
5
back and
months,
defer
it's
to
such a
Sally.
complicated job. I would say it would be great if you could read the zoning bylaws about 80 times and write pencil marks in the margins every time you do it.
so let me, so I'd like to respond to Nick, your point about, so yeah, the reason I thought we should talk about this was because when come January, the board is going to have to do a performance review.
Okay.
And we have to do it based upon an agreed upon set of criteria.
Right.
And so knowing that, in my mind, I know some of these things won't get done. Some of these things have to get done. And some of these things may or may not get done depending upon whether they pop up. But
Right.
if the board is willing to go into the review in January and say, we understand that not all of these goals are possible, and we'll just deal with them on an ad hoc basis based upon what happened over the last 4 months, then we don't have to go through all of this. But on the other hand, I think it's important that Taylor understands, we're not expecting everything of him. And so what are the limits on, when you go into your first performance review, you're like, did I do everything? Did I not do everything? What are the rules? What are the guidelines? And I think it's important that we provide certainty about how we're going to perform that evaluation.
You know what, Diab, what you described is what I learned that they use in schools now, which wasn't around when I was in school, the rubric. And it tells the student exactly what they need to do to get this level of a performance rating, an A, B, or a C, or a D. And I never had them growing up in school. Everything, you had to figure it out for yourself. But we're talking about very clear, honorable, lucid, agreed upon rubric.
Yeah, with the acknowledgement that some of these things are vague and fuzzy, because we don't know, for example, if we get a subdivision coming in the next 4 months, then we'll have to talk about it. But if we don't, then we won't.
Right.
I mean, I would think that Deb and Sally would advise Taylor on what the priorities are that he should focus on, and and make an assessment as to what you think is reasonable, and then at the end of the period, you've kind of already had some feedback happening along the way in terms of performance. And I mean, with the acknowledgement that some of the things aren't going to be possible. And some need to get done.
Would it be helpful for the entire board to identify priorities on page 3 and 4? I feel like a more project-based performance might be helpful in directing what to do in the prior pages 1 and 2, right? So like there are a lot in this list that are sort of done, but we also have 2 very big things going on that we need to get between now and January.
Okay.
Right, so can we work from there and identifying the priorities of the board here? And
Yeah,
then,
okay.
and then see from 1 and 2 where those things might be like more highlighted in January.
That's a good strategy.
Is there something on page 4, Taylor? It looks like there's.
Page 3 and 4. Oh, you don't have it?
4 has a lot more. Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah, this is it. This is all
Yeah.
the stuff. And we're learning every day more and more about the dates associated with all of this. So
Yeah.
this
So
is pretty
obviously
much
it's
the
like
list.
bullet 5, or it's number 5 and 6 are high top priorities right now. In their like priorities A and A, whereas the B's are like the MPIC possibly, right? Or in Holton, Swanton Cross.
Well, certainly on the next page, there's at least 1 B. Let me just see. Waterfield.
Waterfield's sort of a
That's an A.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Right.
Yeah.
So 3 A's, and then Holton Swanton is a B. Master Plan Implementation Committee is a B, or even a C right now.
Right. And 87, 89 Cross is kind of rolling forward. I think that our role is completed at this point.
Yeah. I mean, many of those have done
the other ones
out of our hands.
Yeah, Karma 1016 done.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see if ever 735 Main Street comes up. Those are both out of litigation. I think there will be some work from the planning department just because they are in the CBD and we want to keep track of what's going on there. And let's not forget that, for instance, for 654 Main, I think that's the no, 735 Main is the Fells Hardware site. So we still have things like they have to produce design walls and things like that as part of the process. And so that's something that we'll be part of. So
okay.
Those are more like B's.
I think they're like C's. They're like C's, but they're not. They're there.
They should be on. They shouldn't be crossed out like
they should be on the back burner on low. We should not pay attention to them, but we have bigger things.
Yeah.
But yes, within the next 4 months, I mean, that's sort of all we can put on the plate. Like we can't expect.
Well, where did 3A come in? Was that on the previous?
That was A, yes. That was
number 5.
Right. North Main Street and MBTC.
Priority A.
Right.
And where does him possibly reconvening the Center Business District Historic Committee? I mean, that might. I mean, I'm not that we're holding out a lot of hope, but I'm assuming that he would be the one. I think that's what Brian did.
Well, the problem with that, Nick, is that's actually a select board initiative. And it's up to the select board to actually appoint a new chair for that committee. So we don't have a lot of. Nick, did you freeze? Oh, there you are. Sorry. Yeah, so we'd have to.
I froze in reality.
Yeah, I mean, this is Jack Lemenage has been not crying on my shoulder, but telling me that he's kind of stymied until the select board decides to work on it. And the fact is that Brian was made that he was given that role because no one else stepped up to it. So we're kind of, until the select board feels like that is an important thing to do, it's Sims Corner. Is that you're talking about Sims Corner?
No, I'm talking about the center. I'm talking about the possibility that we may have different dynamics on the ground given MBT 3A.
I think that is. I think what we need to do is we have to look at our resources and decide where that falls in terms of how we allocate our resources.
Mhm.
So I think we need to
I
have.
just, I wanted to put it out there.
No, I'm not saying no. I'm just saying one of the things that we need to look at is what actually needs to get done to get that LHD going.
Mhm.
And so maybe that's something that you can talk about with Jack at the next historical meeting is
Mhm.
what are the steps necessary to get town center LHD
Sure,
moved?
sure, sure. Yeah, that's not a problem.
Yeah,
That
Okay.
actually, it would be great to hear about.
yeah.
Okay.
'Cause,
But I think that the list that we've settled on pages 3 and 4, um, as I Ching recommended, is the A, Bs, and Cs are great.
That was a
Yeah.
good strategy.
I think one thing that we do have to scroll back up to is, and I know that this is just it's working with the historical committee on their annual grant. And so I don't know what the timelines are for that.
Yeah, but I
So-
found the memo today from Jack that listed all the things that Brian did for them. I'll send it over to you, or I can try to find it on my desk.
Yeah, I think the key one right now is that grant.
Yes.
Because
Okay, right.
because that
Taylor,
has
I'll
a
find it
real,
and send it along.
yeah, I mean, so I would
This
say,
November 3.
yeah,
This year.
yeah,
There it
talk
is.
to Taylor, give Jack a buzz and say, when do we have to submit this stuff? Because it's time, it may be time critical, it may be a couple months, but the rest of everything else is kind of soft in a way. But
Mhm.
when it comes to deadlines for money, it typically aren't soft. And I think that's the only
Well,
one.
there are other things that could happen as they walk in, like the number 8 is walk-in. And so as it happens over the next 5 months, right?
Yes, yeah.
And
but
also number 9 is
Yeah.
as it happens, because you can't do your job without all those things. So-
Yeah, I mean, that's why this one, I think this is the one you labeled pretty well, Sally. Taylor, if you go to the top, I think it's ongoing duties. Oh, sorry, to the top of the document.
Yes.
Other way.
I had forgotten
Yep,
this.
there we go. Standing duties.
I know, I forgot I did
And
this.
and Taylor has a standing desk, so this works.
Okay, so I think that we have a direction, and I think that Nancy probably captured it pretty well.
Nancy always does, but we shouldn't take her for granted. We don't take her for granted, Nancy.
So we
Uh,
should recap right now.
No, I think we can,
No,
I think,
we're good.
I think, but we should make sure.
We're
And
good.
I think that part of this is there's a trust of the board that Sally and I will provide appropriate input to Taylor, and I appreciate that trust. But I also really would encourage the board to talk to Taylor and get to understand all of the things that he's going through and provide
Mhm.
the expertise that you've learned. Because I don't think there's not a large enough fire hose of information that he's getting now. He needs a couple more. So,
Okay, all
yeah.
right. We have to
Also-
spray him, right?
If you've ever worked for a board ever in your life, you know that it's all about the individuals, and we should all get to know Taylor so he can get to know us.
Definitely. Set it
You'll
up.
have-
Here we are
You'll-
speaking for him. Taylor, comment?
Well, I mean,
Come on,
just
put him on the spot.
from the perspective of performance goals, I like where we've landed. It's good to have kind of some direction and some, knowing what I can do. I will just say under the direction of the planning board, this stuff, 1 to 13. These are almost all things that I believe will be accomplished just by working on these other projects. I know that there are a few other ones, like grants, but for the most part, I believe that 1 through 13 will be accomplished just through day-to-day work. So
Well, 11 might be a stretch.
sure, some will be a stretch within the next 5 months, but yeah.
Does it say in here a more realistic version of my learn the zoning bylaw?
I
More
believe
realistic
that's
than reading it
called,
80 times?
Yeah, I think that all comes in, provide expertise, provide expertise, provide expertise, provide expertise. And
Okay.
so, by doing that.
Yeah.
Unless, the
Yeah.
only other thing I can think of, Sally, is that, at performance review time in January, we start quizzing Taylor on the esoteric parts of the zoning bylaw.
Well, actually, I was gonna subject Taylor to a tour of my margin notes.
God. Oh my God.
Run while you
Take notes,
can,
Taylor.
Taylor.
Somebody-
Run.
Oh, God.
Okay, I think we're
We're
good.
on.
I think
Right.
we're good. I think we have covered everything we needed to, and remarkably, it's less than it's earlier than 9:45.
Mhm.
So I think we should take advantage of the fact we can have an early evening, unless someone else wants to bring something else up, which we can't do because it's not, unless it's already on the agenda.
I'm into the early morning. or
Okay,
Early,
so
early evening.
So we are, one of the things we used to put on our agenda are action items at the end. So the action items we have, do we have, no, we don't. The action items
No.
we have, is we're gonna publish, we're gonna have a public hearing on our proposed language for the zoning bylaw on the 12th. And we're going to continue looking for 53G design consultants for Waterfield. We're hopefully going to be able to move quickly on the contract with Innis Design and Form in Place. Those are sort of internal things that we're going to moving on. And what else am I missing? We're going to move quickly, hopefully, on the 53 consultants for Waterfield. Did I already say that?
Yeah, you did.
Okay. So we'll have to do that twice now that I said it twice. What else do we? I think we're done. I think that's it for the.
Great.
So one thing, Carrie did text while she was in the air, kind of related to the meeting.
Okay.
So I don't know how to incorporate her comments into the meeting, but she had, if you guys can see your text, but she said in the August 8th minutes, page 3, we need to clarify which projects the architects worked on. I remember VO and WHS, not Ambrose. I think that those were my comments, and I think it was VO and Ambrose, but I don't know
Okay.
how to incorporate that into the notes.
We
It can
do
be a
that.
correction to the minutes. It
I
can
think we
send to
can,
Carrie.
I think
I
we
mean,
can have a very quick further addendum to the minutes of August 8th.
Great.
So why don't we just have a really quick vote to, a motion to further amend the minutes of August 8th as proposed by Carrie Layton in flight and.
But,
Wait,
but,
I
it was
gotta
V-
see,
So moved.
but the correct schools were VO and Ambrose.
where does
Okay.
that show? What page are we on?
It was a comment by me saying that the architects for Lynch were the same architects as VO and Ambrose.
Okay.
So. Right. Okay.
right.
So.
Okay.
Is there a motion to amend August 8th?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, I Ching,
Aye.
Sally,
Aye.
Nick,
Aye.
I say aye as well. I Ching, could you pass that on to Nancy, please?
Yes, but Carrie also sent a second text, I think during the public meeting for
Okay.
Waterfield. Should we say it?
Yeah, well,
Is it,
well, she was watching the meeting, right?
she's watching, but she couldn't speak.
Right, so I think we can include that as,
Okay.
sure, why don't
she
we?
I think it's been covered.
Well, I'll just write what she say what she wrote. Also, what happens to public parking at Civico overnight snow
Okay.
events? Open to
Okay.
residents? I think with a 0.8 parking allowance, we will have lots of cars on the streets. Does the parking study account for traffic from all spaces or just those appointed for residents? And that's Carrie Layton.
That's a good point. That's a good point, Carrie.
So why don't we write that down as a question? And that is, I don't know who we get to answer that, but we'll make sure that that is up on our FAQ page, and we'll figure out who answers that question, because I don't know. That's a select board question in a way, because they're the ones who control public parking. Okay. With that, excuse me, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Excellent. All in favor? Sally,
Aye.
Yu Ching,
Aye.
Nick,
Aye.
and I say aye as well. I'd like to thank, who do we thank today?
Taylor.
Pardon?
Thank you, Taylor. I'm so
Thanks,
glad you're
Taylor.
here, Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Taylor.
Thank you.
Let me
And
see.
thank you, Nancy.
Thank you, Nancy, our recording secretary. Thank you early on, Matt Schuman, our town engineer. We also had joining us today, Jay Tellerman, town council. Thanks again to WinCam for recording us and putting us out on YouTube. Oh my gosh, I forgot. So before we go, last Monday, when Taylor and Sally were having a lunch out on the common, we were approached by a father and son, and it turns out his son Henry is a huge fan of all things the planning board. And so Henry is an avid watcher, and so I just want to say a shout out to Henry. Really appreciate your viewing, and
Hey,
consider
Henry.
Thank you.
Thank you,
consider
Henry.
becoming a town planner. And see what you can do for the long range planning. Anyway, meant to say
Glad
that
to have
to-
you with us, Henry.
Yeah, for sure.
anyway, so I think we just had did we just, yeah, we're all saying.
We
goodbye.
voted. That was.
We're
a
done.
vote.
Out there in
We're done.
TV land,
Okay,
and-
good night,
Yeah.
everybody.
and on September 12th. Have a good night,
Okay.
everyone.
Bye.